You're sitting at home, maybe watching TV, maybe making dinner, and then knock, knock, knock. You open the door, and it's the police. They look at you and say, "We need to see some ID." And here's what most people do. They panic, they scramble, they hand it over without thinking, because when a person in uniform asks you for something, your brain says, just comply. But here's what most people don't realize, and what most lawyers won't tell you for free. You may have had absolutely no legal obligation to hand them anything, and the words you say, or don't say in that moment, can be the difference between walking away free and being used as evidence against yourself. Today, I'm going to give you the exact phrase to use, the Supreme Court cases that back it up, and a step-by-step breakdown of what your rights actually are when police show up at your door demanding ID. Stay with me, because this is one of those videos that could genuinely protect you one day. Let's start with the single most important principle in American constitutional law when it comes to your home. The Fourth Amendment to the United States Constitution protects you against unreasonable searches and seizures, and the U.S. Supreme Court has been very clear. Your home is the most protected place under the Fourth Amendment. In fact, the Supreme Court in a landmark 2013 case, Florida v. Jardines, stated that your home and the area immediately surrounding it is, quote, first among equals when it comes to constitutional protection. Now here's where people get confused. When police knock on your door, what's actually happening legally? This is called a knock-and-talk. It's a well-established law enforcement tactic where police approach your front door, knock, and attempt to speak with you without a warrant. And yes, it's legal. The Supreme Court confirmed this in Kentucky v. King in 2011, saying that officers can knock on your door because that's no more than any private citizen could do. But, and here is the critical part that most people miss, the court said something else in that same ruling. The occupant has no obligation to open the door or to speak. Read that again. No obligation to open the door, no obligation to speak. That is the Supreme Court of the United States telling you directly that you can stand behind your closed door and say absolutely nothing, and that is fully within your rights. Now, let's get to the exact question at the heart of this video. Do you have to show ID to police at your door? The answer is, it depends on two things. One, whether you've been legally detained, and two, what state you live in. Let me explain. In the United States, there's no single federal law requiring you to identify yourself to police in all situations. Instead, about 26 states have what are called stop and identify statutes. These states include Alabama, Arizona, Colorado, Florida, Georgia, Illinois, Indiana, Kansas, Louisiana, Missouri, Nevada, New Hampshire, New Mexico, New York, North Dakota, Ohio, Texas, Utah, Vermont, Wisconsin, and others. In these states, under specific conditions, you can be legally required to provide your name to a police officer. But here's the key. Stop and identify laws only apply when you have been lawfully detained, and to lawfully detain you, the officer must have what the law calls reasonable, articulable suspicion that you have committed, are committing, or are about to commit a crime. This comes from the 1968 Supreme Court case Terry v. Ohio, one of the most important Fourth Amendment cases ever decided. In that case, the court said officers can briefly detain someone based on specific, observable facts that suggest criminal activity. Not a hunch, not a feeling, actual facts they can describe. So if a police officer just shows up at your door and says, "Show me your ID," with no specific suspicion of any crime, in most situations, you are not legally required to comply. Now, in states without stop and identify laws, like California, Oregon, Washington, and others, you generally have no obligation to identify yourself unless you are actually placed under arrest. And here's another crucial point. Even in stop and identify states, these laws were designed for public streets and encounters, not for people standing inside or at the threshold of their own home. Your home is a different legal universe. Okay, you've been waiting for this. Here it is. If police knock on your door and ask for ID without a warrant, without arresting you, here is the exact phrase you should use. Officer, am I being detained or am I free to go? I don't consent to searches, and I'd like to speak to an attorney before answering any questions. Let's break down why every single one of these words matters. Am I being detained or am I free to go? This is the most powerful question in street-level constitutional law. It forces the officer to make a legal declaration. Either they have reasonable suspicion and you are being detained, in which case legal rules apply, or you are free to go, in which case the encounter is what's called consensual, and you can simply end it. I don't consent to searches. Never, ever, ever give consent to a search. The moment you say, sure, come on in, or even just step aside and let them in without objecting, you may have legally waived your Fourth Amendment rights. Courts have held that consent is voluntary, but they've also held that silence or stepping back can be interpreted as consent. So say it out loud, clearly, on camera if possible. I'd like to speak to an attorney before answering any questions. This is your Fifth Amendment right, the right not to incriminate yourself. The moment you invoke this under the ruling in Burgess versus Tompkins, any further questioning should stop until you have counsel present. Now, one additional option if you don't want to open the door at all, you can speak through the door. You can say, do you have a warrant? If not, I'm not opening the door and I'm not answering questions. This is completely legal, completely within your rights, and extremely powerful. Now, I want to be honest with you because this channel is about legal truth, not just telling you what you want to hear. There are situations you must comply. First, if they have a warrant. If police arrive with a valid search warrant or arrest warrant signed by a judge, they have the legal authority to enter your home. You should still ask to see it through a window or cracked door, verify it has your correct address and is signed by a judge, and then comply. Do not resist physically. Your battle happens in court, not in your living room. Second, exigent situations. Courts have carved out exceptions for true emergencies, like if someone inside is screaming for help, officers are in hot pursuit of a fleeing suspect who just ran into your home, or there's an immediate risk of evidence destruction. In these cases, police may enter without a warrant. Third, you've been lawfully arrested. If you are placed under arrest, even at your doorstep, you are then legally required to identify yourself. Refusing at that point compounds your legal problems. Fourth, if you're in a stop and identify state and you are lawfully detained outdoors or in public. Remember, being detained means the officer has specific, articulable suspicion of a crime, not just curiosity. Outside of these situations, your rights are strong. Use them. Now, let me walk you through the most common mistakes people make, because knowing what not to do is just as important as knowing what to say. Mistake number 1. Opening the door wide. The moment you open your door wide, you expose everything inside to what's called the plain view doctrine. Anything an officer can see from a lawful vantage point can be used as evidence against you without a warrant. Crack the door, speak through it, or step outside and pull it shut behind you. Never give a free visual sweep of your home. Mistake number 2, saying, I have nothing to hide. This is well-intentioned, but legally catastrophic. It doesn't create any legal protection for you, and it often leads people to consent to searches because they feel guilty refusing. Your rights exist regardless of whether you're hiding anything. Invoking them is not an admission of guilt, it's wisdom. Mistake number 3, being hostile. I know, it's your home. You feel violated. But being rude, aggressive, or combative with officers makes everything worse. Courts give police wide latitude when they believe their safety was at risk. Stay calm, be polite, but be firm. You can be completely respectful and still protect every single one of your rights. Mistake number 4, thinking silence is enough. In the 2013 Supreme Court case Salinas versus Texas, the court held that simply staying silent is not enough to invoke your Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination. You must explicitly invoke it. That's why you need to say the words, "I'd like to speak to an attorney before answering any questions." Silence alone won't protect you. Mistake number 5, forgetting to document everything. The moment you realize police are at your door, start recording if it's safe and legal to do so. Audio and video recordings are your best protection against false narratives. In all 50 states, you have the right to record police performing their duties in public and at your own doorstep. That recording could be the single most important piece of evidence if this ever goes to court. This topic deserves its own video, but here's the essential legal truth. The same Fourth Amendment principles apply. ICE agents cannot enter your home without a warrant signed by a judge. An ICE administrative warrant, the kind they often carry, is not signed by a judge and does not grant them legal authority to enter your home against your will. Under guidance from the ACLU and immigration law experts, you have the right to ask to see the warrant through a window or under the door. Ask if it's signed by a judge. Decline to open the door if it is not a judicial warrant. The phrase to use here is, "I do not consent to your entry. If you have a judicial warrant, please slide it under the door." If it is a judicial warrant, signed by a federal judge, you must comply, but knowing the difference could be the most important legal knowledge you ever have. Here's what I want you to walk away with today, not just the phrases, but a mindset shift. Your constitutional rights are not just words on paper, they are legal tools, and like any tool, they only work if you know how to use them before you need them. So here's what I want you to do right now, before this video ends. 1. Know your state's law. Look up whether your state has a stop and identify statute. It matters. That 30 seconds of research could save you years of legal headaches. 2. Write down the phrase. Memorize it or save it in your phone. "Officer, am I being detained or am I free to go? I don't consent to searches and I'd like to speak to an attorney before answering any questions." 3. Know that invoking your rights is not suspicious behavior. Courts have specifically held that exercising constitutional rights cannot itself be used as evidence of guilt. You have these rights. Use them without shame. 4. Find a criminal defense attorney in your area before you need one. Have their number saved. In a high-stress encounter, the last thing you want to be doing is Googling lawyers. And 5, share this video. Right now, someone you know is one unexpected knock away from making a life-altering legal mistake out of pure ignorance. Knowledge is the most powerful legal protection there is. The law isn't always on the side of those who don't know it, but today you know more than most people ever will about what happens when law enforcement shows up at your door. The Fourth Amendment gives you a fortress, the Fifth Amendment gives you a shield, and now you have the exact words to use them. If you found this valuable, subscribe to Legal Logic. We publish videos just like this every week because knowing the law shouldn't be a luxury, it should be something everyone has access to. Drop your questions in the comments. I read every single one. And remember, the most dangerous thing you can be in a legal situation is uninformed. Stay protected.